Welcome, adventurers, to the next video today. And what we're talking about is that the secret to motivation might not be what you think. It's actually reducing the number of choices that you have. And I've got a few points for us to hit today. In fact, I wrote them all down here, 5 of them. The first one that I'm going to make is that we think more options means more freedom, but oftentimes what that will actually be is the opposite. There's a lot of things that are a little counterintuitive out there, and this is one of those big ones. So I'll give you an example. If you're working on something on your computer, oh no, even better, no, this one's my favorite one actually. Forget that one. So if you're going to a restaurant, for example, and you've got a giant menu, right? There's a lot of stuff. I don't know about you, but for me, I get a little bit stressed out because there's a lot of choice. There's like so much choice there that I'm like, I don't know, do I want a sandwich, a burger, pasta, right? You've been to BJ's? There's a place that has so much that it's hard to narrow down what I even feel like. But then there's a place like In-N-Out, for example, which has 3 things on the menu plus drinks, right? Or fries. And I feel like a little bit more at peace when I go there. Sure, there's less option, but by going there, I actually have like way less decision fatigue, especially if I'm like, I just want something that's nutrient dense, fairly predictable in its flavor and consistent. And I don't really have to, I don't know, I just don't have to give it a whole lot of thought. That's probably my favorite example when it comes to how often more options doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to feel a lot better or do a lot better with such a wide array of them. Now, the alternative, the flip side of this, to sort of like hit the point home a little bit more, is my second point, that more options actually often becomes, at least for me, decision paralysis. There's a lot of cases where, I mean, the restaurant's a good example, but also if you give me like a whole swath of colors to paint my picture or whatever I'm doing that day, it's a little bit more challenging than if you gave me 4. If you gave me 4, I'd still be able to do something, but I'd do it even faster, probably, not because there wasn't option, but because the lack of it gave me more. In fact, there's a famous, famous in my circles, but really wonderful talk from, oh God, I can't remember his name. It's been a long day. I've been on the bus all day. Anyways, not important. He's one of the guys from the Monty Python movies, if you know. John Cleese, there we go. It's John Cleese. All right, so old school comedian, funny guy. So John Cleese gave this talk about creativity to a big group of business people, which is kind of ironic, but he did a really good job of explaining a couple of things, of which one of them was that actually finding constraint in your environment was one of the handful of things that you could possibly do to increase the amount of creativity you were able to command. Which is to say that because you had limited options, you were forced to lean into creative solutions that weren't obvious beforehand. And that's actually pretty interesting, that I think we kind of overlook that a lot, that if you have access to everything, your creative capacity is a little bit less because obviously there's more solutions that are out there. And that's why it's so interesting that when you get to industries that have been a certain way for a very long time, it's sometimes the newcomers that come into a business industry that aren't able to lean on the same levers that some of these, old companies have been there forever. And the old boys club, as you might call it, where they're buddies with everyone there and have access to everything. You have to be more creative. And sometimes that leads to a really important breakthrough, innovation, some people would say, right? This big popular buzzword. It comes from a lot of the creative people having capacity to try something within a closed space. So it's important that you give yourself permission to do that too, because if you have access to everything, it ends up limiting you. Whereas when you limit yourself, you kind of get access to the best stuff. All right, third, constraints create momentum. Now, this is kind of going off of what I was saying before, but when you have a limit to what you can do, it gives you exactly the resources that you need. So, for example, I have 1 month left with working on the bus before it's up and running. It's got to be going by next month at the end of the last school games so that we can stay on track for the tour. But guess what? I have, holy crap, so far we've gone through and we've gutted the whole thing, and we just started doing electrical, and you know, it's painted. We just started doing electrical, plumbing we haven't even gotten to yet, the furniture we haven't gotten to, the insulation isn't there. But there's like, the important part is the first part, the deconstruction, that's done. We're doing the construction part now. And with that last 30 days, well, I mean, if I'm honest, I've been burnt out since the first world tour. And I don't know if you've ever suffered from burnout, but there are days that I get up and I'm right in front of the thing and I know exactly what to do and I have the time constraints and it's hard. So what actually ends up pushing myself to do the thing is oftentimes just knowing that there's a limitation on time. And so today, one of the big things I did was call an electrician because I needed help. I wasn't gonna wire a residential breaker myself. And we sat at the thing, and it was funny too, because I thought he would come into the space, he'd be like, "You need electricity." And I said, "Yeah, here's the batteries." And he goes, "All right," we high five, it's plugged in, he fucks off, right? I thought that would be the thing. No, we sat there like brainstorming different solutions because we had a set number of constraints that were there. And so we came up with it. For example, I have these batteries that plug in at a certain wattage and voltage, and it's quite high. And so we need a really good amount of cable, like a solid cable that could handle that amount of electricity at that voltage, that wattage, all at once to go into the breaker. The breaker unit, which, as I recently found out, is required so that the batteries aren't injured if there's a giant surge or we get hit with lightning or something like that. It reduces the likelihood that all of my stuff explodes on the bus. So I thought originally, like I said, that they'd come in and just install the thing, but no, I found this cable. I was like, "Hey, maybe we can use this." He's like, "Yes, that's the cable that we could use." I found this little, the head to plug it in. We put it together. We just spent like an hour coming up with creative solutions to make the thing work. And by the time it was done, we figured it out. But he wouldn't have been able to do it with the pile of things that I knew I would probably need. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without understanding how to split wires and connect them. Like, he's an electrician for 30 years, right? And that was something really beautiful that happened, that if I didn't have that constraint, I may not have made the call, meaning that we might not have done it right. And somewhere down the line, the product might have been the same, but maybe we would have hit a bump, something dislodged, and then all of a sudden we don't have power and we have to troubleshoot. But now everything's buried in the walls. So I hope you're seeing here that sometimes these constraints are going to force you to take action in a direction that you wouldn't have if you didn't have the constraint beforehand. I hope that makes sense. Now, the last one is that my life has consistently improved when I intentionally reduced my options. So recently, I mean, probably a lot of you know Goosify. Goosify was the community that originally it was called Captivate back in the day. And I liked it because it was this cool synthesis between like kind of businessy, but also magical, right? The idea of not just doing something so sexy that someone couldn't say no, but making something so good that people are attracted to it. And captivation was like this cool word. It was a little bit less cringy than like enchantment. And I was like, okay, yeah, captivate could work. And so it did, and it worked really well. But then as I became more well-known on the platform, everyone knew me, Goose, but they were like, "What's Captivate?" And so I had to sit and explain what I do, which is like teaching people how to find their freedom through building community online, like making money, whatever. And so at some point I was like, I'm gonna have to change this because now people know me much more than the community. And what I ended up doing was changing it to Goosify, because you knew it was me, but it was, probably, you could assume that it was a product of just who I am and what I do. And it was very successful in that. So, in that process of going through and literally refactoring, like the way that company was branded, how we described it, was something that required me to say at that moment that, okay, my personal brand will be attached to this community. And it did, in a way, give me fewer options, because Captivate could have been many things, and it wasn't necessarily tied to me. But now, if I made a Goosify, it meant that it was attached to my personal brand. So if my personal brand took off, it took off. It went down, it went down. If my product wasn't good, my personal brand would take a hit, right? There's a lot more at stake when you make those sorts of decisions. But here's what it did permit me to do, is down the line, later on as I became like burnt out, which again, I'm still in that window, but still, here recording the things. When I was finding that I was just spreading myself too thin on doing so many things, I eventually, with my team, restructured it so that I'm no longer even the CEO. I'm the marketer for my company, which is really cool. I enjoyed doing those things a lot more, but now it means that I both have the luxury of not making the big decisions and the pain of not making the big decisions. That's a big decision to make, you know what I mean? So in doing that, it gave me more freedom to be able to focus on what I want to do. So that freedom, or as a result of constraint, ironic, I know, now gives me the ability to go through and lean into the things that I really enjoy, which is trying to explain and show what it looks like to free yourself, no matter what the method is. In little ways like wearing wizard hats when you don't have to, in, I don't know, in the middle of nature, somewhere out in the wilderness. You don't know where I am, but it's out in the wilderness. So in any case, the point is that when constraints hit you, or if they're not hitting you, if they hit you, there's a silver lining. It means whatever you're going to do, as long as you don't quit, is going to get even better. And if they hit you, if they're not hitting you and you're starting to find yourself in situations where it feels a little bit dubious, it may be time to draw some constraints around the life that you have so that you're focusing just on the things that you want to do, because those things will likely get better. Okay, I hope that helps. Have fun, make friends, and if you want to join Goosify, follow the link below and maybe we can find you freedom in the ways that I know how. Okay, see you later.